He was born in a small, crowded house at 17 Florence Street, in a place called the Gorbals in Glasgow. The streets were tight, the walls were old, and there wasn't much money. But that's where his story began. Life wasn't easy there. People didn't have much, and every day felt like a little battle. But even as a young boy, he was strong, not just in his hands, but in his heart. He didn't learn to fight in a big gym. He learned in noisy, bumpy carnival tents that came around during the hard times. While other boys watched, he stepped into the ring. Grown men would challenge anyone to a fight, and there he was, a brave little boy, standing tall, ready to show what he could do. He got it sometimes. He got tired, but he never gave up. Every punch he threw was full of hope. Hope that he could make a better life. Hope that people would see him. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a boy who believed in himself, even when the world was rough. And that's what made him special. Benny Lynch had his first real fight as a professional boxer in April 1931. He didn't just win. He knocked his opponent, young Bryce, down in the second round. It was a strong start, but things didn't stay easy. Out of his first 15 fights, Benny only won 8. Some people may have doubted him. Maybe even he had quiet moments where he wondered if he was really meant for this. But Benny wasn't the kind of boy who gave up just because the beginning was hard. In June 1932, he proved something to himself. He faced a tough, older boxer named Joe Aiken and beat him fair and square. That one felt different. It was the first sign that Benny was starting to climb. Then came March 1933, and with it, a spark that never stopped burning. Benny went on a long, powerful streak. For 3 whole years, nobody could beat him. He kept growing, kept learning, kept fighting smarter. In October, he beat Bert Kirby. In January, he won a big match against Jim Brady to get a shot at the Scottish flyweight title. And in May, he grabbed that title by beating Jim Campbell. Just a month later, they fought again, and Benny showed it wasn't luck the first time. He won again. That year, he didn't slow down. One after another, fighters came to test him. Maurice Uganin, Jim Brady again, Valentin Angelman, Pedro Ruiz. Benny faced them all, and he beat them. He was no longer just a boy from the Gorbals. He was a champion in the making, one punch, one fight, one dream at a time. By 1935, Benny Lynch wasn't just fighting. He was fighting for history. On the 9th of September, in a packed stadium in Manchester, Benny stepped into the ring with Jackie Brown. They had faced each other 6 months earlier and ended in a draw. But this time, Benny came with fire in his heart and the hopes of a whole city on his back. Glasgow didn't stay home that day. Thousands of people traveled south just to watch their boy fight. And Benny didn't disappoint. He knocked Jackie down 8 times and ended the fight in the second round. That night, Benny didn't just win. He became the British, European, and world flyweight champion all at once. He had made it, but champions still have to fight. And Benny kept going. He beat Gaston Maiden next, though he missed weight and had to pay a penalty. Then came Harry Orton, then Phil Milligan. Win after win, Benny pushed forward. But even the strongest have hard days. In March 1936, after 3 long years without a loss, Benny was beaten on points by Jimmy Warnock in Belfast. It stung. He wasn't used to losing anymore. But like always, he didn't let it break him. In September, he came back strong. He defended his British and European titles against Pat Palmer and ended the fight in the 8th round. The champion was still standing tall, but outside the ring, trouble was waiting. That November, Benny's former manager took him to court, demanding £2,000, saying Benny broke their deal. Benny fought back with his own claim, saying the manager had failed him too. It wasn't the kind of fight you train for in the gym, but Benny had learned long ago. You face what comes and you don't back down. Even with all his titles, not everyone across the world agreed that Benny Lynch was the true world flyweight champion. On the other side of the Atlantic, there was still doubt. But Benny wasn't a man who liked loose ends. So in January 1937, he stepped into the ring in London against the Filipino champion, Small Montana, the man holding the NBA and NYSAC titles. Benny didn't just fight for himself that night. He fought for respect, for truth, for the crown he already carried in his heart. And he won. On points, clean and clear. That night, he became the undisputed world flyweight champion. No more questions. No more debate. He kept going. Beat the Spanish champion, Fortunato Ortega. But in March, something strange happened. In a fight against Len Hampston, Benny was disqualified, not because of anything he did, but because his seconds stepped into the ring too early. 3 weeks later, they met again, and this time Benny left no doubt, stopping Hampston in the 10th round. But trouble never stayed far. In June, he fought Jimmy Warnock again and lost. Benny hadn't made the weight, and maybe his focus was slipping. The pressures, the fame, the battles inside and outside the ring, they were starting to show. Then came Peter Kane in October 1937, undefeated, full of promise. But Benny had fire left. He handed Kane his very first knockout loss, defending both his British and world titles. One of Benny's training sessions before that fight drew 10,000 people. 10,000, just to watch him prepare. That's the kind of magic he carried. But life wasn't always kind to Benny. Later that same month, he was in a car crash and knocked unconscious. 2 months after, he was back in the ring, stopping Georges Bouteille in the 8th round in Leicester. He was still fighting, still winning, but things were beginning to fall apart around him. In March 1938, he met Peter Kane again. This time it was a draw. Once again, Benny couldn't make the weight. Another forfeit. The cracks were growing. And then, everything began to unravel. Later that same month, Benny was arrested. He had crashed his car while drunk. He hit a telegraph pole, and worse, a baby's pram, a 12-week-old child. He didn't stop. His trial was postponed until after his next world title fight against American Jackie Jurek. But even then, Benny couldn't escape the storm. He came in half a pound over the weight limit. That meant he'd already lost the title before the first bell rang. He won the fight anyway, stopping Jurek in the 12th round. But the belt was gone. By July, he stood in court. The judge fined him 20 pounds and banned him from driving for a year. Benny was still a fighter, but the world outside the ring was starting to hit harder than anything he'd ever faced with gloves on. By July 1938, things were starting to fall apart fast for Benny. The British Boxing Board of Control fined him 200 pounds and stripped him of his British and European titles. Benny didn't take it quietly. He appealed the decision, but trouble kept following him. In September, they suspended his boxing license for not keeping up with his training rules. Still, Benny wasn't ready to give it up. He fought Cale Morgan later that month. He came in overweight again, more than 7 pounds heavier than his opponent, and lost on points. Then October came. His weight had gone up even more. He stepped into the ring with oral toma and was knocked out in the 3rd round. The fire that once burned so bright in Benny was now flickering. People began to worry. He was offered 3 months holiday and taken to a sanatorium in Kent, where he stayed for a few weeks. It wasn't just about fitness anymore. Benny needed rest, help, and peace. In December, he left for Ireland and stayed in a quiet monastery near Waterford. Maybe he was trying to find himself again. Maybe he just needed silence. But in January 1939, something frightening happened. Benny went missing during a training camp in Stirlingshire. Hours later, they found him, cold and alone, lost on a hill, wearing only pajamas, a robe, and slippers. He had been wandering for 6 hours and was suffering from hypothermia. The great champion who once made crowds roar was now wandering the dark in silence. The next month, he was arrested again, this time for assault. In March, the court found him guilty. He had attacked his estranged wife, her 11-year-old sister, and even 3 police officers. There was another, darker charge that he tried to harm his 18-month-old son, but that one was ruled not proven. The court fined him 20 pounds, with the threat of 60 days in jail if he couldn't pay. By June, the tax office came after him too. Benny wasn't just a boxer anymore. He was a man sinking under the weight of everything outside the ring. Fame, pain, habits he couldn't shake. The world that once cheered for him now watched in silence. And yet, behind every headline, he was still that boy from Florence Street. Lost, hurting, but once full of fight. By early 1939, the ring was slipping further out of Benny's reach. He was supposed to fight Dudley Lewis that February, but the boxing board wouldn't let happen. They said no, and by August, they made it official. They refused to give him back his license. Their words were cold, but clear. He is at present not fit to carry on a career as a professional boxer. It must have hurt. For a man who had once carried a whole city's hopes in his fists, to be told he could no longer fight. It was like losing his voice. The years that followed were hard. In April 1940, Benny was fined for being drunk on Glasgow Road. Just a man, walking alone through the city he once made proud, now struggling to hold himself together. Then came darker days. In 1942, he was charged with serious crimes involving young girls in a cinema. He was found guilty of assaulting 2 children. It was heartbreaking, shocking. A man who had once been loved by thousands had lost himself completely. He kept battling with alcohol, year after year, trying and failing to fight the one opponent he couldn't knock down. Many tried to help. There were treatments, attempts to save him, moments where he may have tried to claw his way back. But the damage had gone too deep. In 1946, Benny Lynch died. He was only 33, the boy from Florence Street, the world champion, the fighter who once made stadiums roar, passed away from malnutrition and respiratory failure. Alone, but not forgotten. When he was laid to rest at St. Kentigern's Cemetery in Glasgow, some 2,000 people came to say goodbye. Because no matter how lost he became, Benny had once given them something unforgettable: hope, pride, and the beautiful pain of watching a fighter rise. Even after his death, Benny Lynch's story never truly ended. In 1974, his life took the stage in a powerful play by Bill Bryden, Benny Lynch, reminding people of the boy who rose from the Gorbals to touch the sky. The play became a book, then a television adaptation, and years later, another playwright, Peter Arnett, told Benny's story once more. His face returned in music, gracing the cover of Scottish rock band Guns' 1992 album Gallus, a quiet nod to a man who once stood fearless. In 2003, a documentary by director John McKenzie and actor Robert Carlyle brought Benny's life to a new generation. Then in 2017, another film, Benny, by Andrew Gallimore, looked deeper into the man behind the gloves. The story still wasn't finished. In 2019, the Benny Lynch story toured theaters across Scotland. Written by David Carswell, directed by David Heyman Jr., and brought to life by actor Stephen Purton, it reminded everyone that Benny's journey, full of brilliance, sorrow, and heart, still mattered. Because Benny Lynch wasn't just a fighter. He was a boy who came from nothing. He soared. He stumbled. He gave people something real. And even now, long after the final bell, Scotland still remembers. Benny Lynch didn't leave behind riches or records untouched. What he left was a feeling, raw, honest, unforgettable. A story of glory and heartbreak that still echoes through Glasgow's streets and beyond. He rose. He fell. But he was never forgotten. Because in the end, Benny wasn't just a fighter. He was a flame that burned too fast, but never stopped shining.